He is rich, powerful, and can afford anything money can buy. She, on the other hand, is poor, wandering from street to street, searching through trash cans just to survive and take care of herself. Now, you might be wondering, how could the life of a blind, wealthy billionaire possibly collide with that of a homeless girl? How could two people from such different worlds cross paths in a way that changes everything? Well, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story of how fate brought them together and how this homeless girl, against all odds, ends up saving him. It was a sunny afternoon in the city of Lagos. The roads were buzzing with vehicles, horns blaring in the distance, and people moving about their daily lives. The streets overflowed with sellers calling out their prices, hustlers chasing opportunities, and the restless rhythm of a city that never slowed down. Amidst all this chaos lived a young billionaire, Mr. Williams. He was not just any man. He was a force in the business world. Owner of one of the largest companies in the state, Williams was known for his brilliance, his sharp mind, and his relentless pursuit of greatness. He was a man who never settled, always pushing himself to reach and surpass the limits others thought impossible. Day and night he worked tirelessly. Meetings filled his mornings, flights abroad consumed his weeks, and negotiations that shaped industries occupied his nights. To him, life was business and business was life. His workers often pleaded with him to take a break, to rest, even for a moment. But he would always brush them off with the same words. Taking a break is for the disabled and the dead. I am neither. And with that, he would bury himself deeper in work, shutting out the world. But fate has a way of humbling even the strongest of men. One day, everything changed for Mr. Williams. An unexpected event struck, an event so sudden, so devastating, that it shattered his entire world in a single moment. One day, after a long and draining meeting with his shareholders at the office, Mr. Williams was completely exhausted. Deciding to call it a day, he got into his car and began the drive home. His body was tired, his mind overwhelmed, and in his rush to avoid the heavy Lagos traffic, he drove far too quickly. Unfortunately, his decision came at a terrible cost. In a split second, he collided with another vehicle. The crash was brutal. People rushed to the scene as his car crumpled, and moments later, an ambulance carried him away. At the hospital, he was rushed into the operating room. The doctors worked tirelessly, fighting to save his life. After hours of surgery, Mr. Williams survived, but at a devastating price. The accident had destroyed both of his eyes. The doctors gave him a grim report. His chances of regaining his sight were 1 in 10, and even that would require long, painful sessions of physical eye therapy. When the reality sank in, Mr. Williams was devastated. The once powerful, confident billionaire now found himself trapped in darkness. He was angry, bitter, and broken. Confined within the massive walls of his mansion, he lashed out at anyone who tried to help. Nurses, caregivers, and helpers came to look after him, but he chased them away with his arrogance and rude behavior. None of them stayed for long. As the days turned into weeks, loneliness began to creep in. He felt abandoned, isolated in his own world of silence and shadows. His empire, once built with his sweat and vision, was now being managed by his trusted shareholder and friend, Mr. Sean. But even then, Williams knew deep down that no one could run the company the way he did. And so, the man who once controlled everything now found himself powerless, angry, and drowning in despair. One day, Mr. Williams was feeling sick and restless at home. Wanting to get some fresh air, he asked his driver to take him out. They stopped at a nearby restaurant, where he sat quietly for a while, sipping a glass of water. Hours later, he stood up with his walking stick and made his way outside. His driver was still in the car waiting. Blind and unaware of his surroundings, Mr. Williams unknowingly began to cross the busy road. Suddenly, a car sped toward him. He felt the rush of danger, but before impact, a hand pulled him back. He stumbled onto the sidewalk, saved just in time by a young homeless girl who happened to be passing by. "Watch it, mister. You could have been hit by that car." "Where exactly did you think you were going?" the girl asked, her tone sharp with concern. Mr. Williams didn't respond. Instead, he adjusted his stick and started walking away, his pride shielding his vulnerability. The girl, however, wasn't ready to leave him like that. "Mister, please let me help you," she said softly. But Mr. Williams was never a man to accept help easily. He brushed her off with irritation. "Listen, young lady, I am not a damsel in distress. I don't need your help, and I didn't ask for it. Leave me alone." He walked forward, his words cold and dismissive. The homeless girl, however, refused to stay silent. She caught up to him and spoke firmly. "I don't know what you think you gain by being rude to people. I understand. You lost your sight, and maybe that pain made you bitter. But not everything can be done alone. Sometimes you need others. If you keep pushing everyone away, you'll be alone for the rest of your life." Her words struck him deeply. All his life, people treated him with respect, fear, or admiration, but never had anyone spoken to him so honestly, without caring about his wealth or power. For a moment, he was speechless. Just then, his driver rushed up, having been searching for him. Relieved, the driver guided him back to the car. The homeless girl quietly walked away, satisfied that he was now safe. That night, however, Mr. Williams couldn't shake her words. They echoed in his mind over and over. The girl's voice, her courage, and her truth unsettled him in a way nothing else had. He barely slept. The next day, determined to find her again, he returned to the same restaurant. He instructed his driver to keep an eye out for the girl who had saved him. After a few hours, the driver spotted her and brought her inside. She sat across from Mr. Williams at the table. "I want to start by apologizing for yesterday," he said quietly. "I was rude to you after you saved my life. Thank you for stepping in when you didn't have to." The girl gave a gentle smile. "It's no problem, sir. I accept your apology. I'm Williams," he introduced himself, leaning slightly forward. "And you are?" "My name is Grace, sir," she replied. Something about her voice stirred his curiosity. He had expected harshness or roughness from someone living on the streets. Instead, she carried herself with grace and manners that surprised him. "Grace," he repeated thoughtfully. Then, with genuine interest, he asked, "Tell me, how did a well-mannered young woman like you end up homeless? Don't you have a job to earn a living or at least rent an apartment?" Mr. Williams asked curiously. Grace hesitated. She didn't want to open up about her life to a total stranger, especially not to a blind man she barely knew. But for reasons she couldn't explain, she found herself confiding in him. "I lost my parents in a car accident when I was 16, she began softly. "Since then, I couldn't get a job. I have no relatives willing to help, so I wandered the streets alone. People who live in big mansions can never understand how hard it is to survive out there. But I survived. I started picking cans, selling them just to feed myself. I dreamed of having my own apartment one day, to live comfortably, but that dream is overrated. For now, I do whatever I can just to survive, sir." Her voice carried pain, but also strength. Mr. Williams was touched. Though he couldn't see her face, he felt every word of her story. Out of gratitude, and out of the goodness still in his heart, he decided to make her an offer. "As a thank you gift for saving my life," he said gently, "I would like to give you a job and a place to stay. I pay well." To his shock, Grace declined immediately. "I'm sorry, sir," she replied firmly, "but I can't take the job. I saved you because I was in the position to do so. You don't owe me anything, so don't feel guilty or entitled to pay me back." Mr. Williams was moved again, this time by her refusal. How could a girl who had nothing reject help so boldly? His curiosity about her only deepened. "I understand," he said slowly, "but listen to me. I'm not doing this because you saved my life or because I pity you. I see courage in you, the strength you've shown to survive all these years. That's what pushed me. You're a young woman with a bright future, Grace. Please let me help you." Grace was torn. She needed the job, yes, but she hated being treated softly or pitted. Yet this time, she sensed sincerity in his words. Reluctantly, she nodded and accepted. From the restaurant, Mr. Williams took her to his mansion. Stepping out of the car, Grace's eyes widened. It was the first time she had ever seen such a massive estate. The house was so large it could accommodate dozens of people. Clutching her small bag, she followed him inside, her heart racing with disbelief. Williams, though blind, understood her silence. "I know you must be surprised, standing in a place like this," he said with a faint smile. "Of course, sir. I've never been in a mansion in my entire life." "Thank you," Grace replied sincerely. "You're welcome," William said. "From tomorrow, you'll start your work. Everything you need will be provided. Just keep things in order. And pardon me if I'm rough sometimes. Circumstances have made me that way." "I understand, sir," Grace replied respectfully. He guided her to her room. Grace was overjoyed, unable to believe she now had a roof over her head. When she tried to assist Mr. Williams back to his room, he politely declined. After all, it's his home. He knew every corner by heart despite his blindness. The next morning, Mr. Williams woke up and made his way downstairs, intending to prepare tea for himself. Suddenly, he heard sounds from the kitchen and froze for a moment, until he remembered he had hired Grace. Walking in, he found her already at work. Grace had woken early, cleaned the entire house, and prepared breakfast for him. Surprised, Williams sat down quietly as she served him. For the first time in a long while, he felt the warmth of companionship. Later that afternoon, he sat alone in the living room, waiting for his nurse to arrive for vision therapy. Those sessions were his only hope of regaining sight, even though the chances were slim. On weekends, his trusted friend and shareholder, Mr. Sean, always visited with documents for him to sign, essential papers to keep the company afloat in his absence. Sean, however, was stunned when he discovered Williams had hired a helper. He had never thought his strong-willed friend would allow anyone so close. Week after week, Mr. Williams remained distant, withdrawn into his thoughts. Grace, watching him in his solitude, felt pity. She knew the kind of man he was: proud, stubborn, and used to carrying the world on his shoulders. That was why she made a quiet decision in her heart. She would do her best not just to serve him, but to keep him company. Because deep down, she could tell he needed more than just help. He needed a friend. After Grace was done with the house chores, she made her way to the living room, where Mr. Williams sat alone as always. "Mr. Williams, aren't you tired of isolating yourself with no one to talk to? Doesn't it get exhausting?" she asked gently. "I never told you I needed help or someone to talk to." "I'm fine the way I am," he replied coldly, the same response he always gave. "That's not true." "I disagree with you," Grace said boldly. She paused, then asked, "Okay, if somehow you weren't blind, where do you think you would be right now?" "I think you already know the answer to that," William said with a sigh. "I wouldn't be here talking to you." Grace smiled faintly, not offended by his sharp words. She understood his frustration. I think you're a good man, Mr. Williams. You only changed because you felt helpless without your sight. But I don't believe you're helpless. You know every corner of this house. You even walk in your garden alone without anyone's help. That's strength, not weakness. You know, she added softly, her eyes clouding with sadness, I wish I had a brother to talk to, or a sister to struggle with. But I'm all alone in this world. Don't be like that, Mr. Williams. Don't push people away. With that, she left him in silence. For the second time since hiring her, Mr. Williams was deeply moved by Grace's words. He realized he actually enjoyed her company, the way she spoke, her choice of words, and how she had the ability to calm him down. Conversations with her felt different. She stirred something inside him that business deals, meetings, and all his wealth never could. The next morning, after Grace served his breakfast, William surprised her. Grace, sit with me, he said quietly. She obeyed, sitting across the table. For the first time, he admitted the truth. I am alone, and I don't want to be alone anymore. They talked for a long while, sharing stories over breakfast. For the first time in years, Williams felt human connection, not out of profit or obligation, but genuine warmth. With Grace, he felt something new, something refreshing. Days later, they began taking walks around the compound together. Williams let Grace guide him, a thing he had never allowed anyone to do before. He always feared appearing weak and vulnerable. But with her, he started learning to let go. He was beginning to see life differently, not just living for himself, but for others as well. But everything began to change when trust was tested. One afternoon, Sean visited Williams, as he always did, to discuss business. The two men sat in the living room, speaking like old friends. Sean had been the only man Williams truly trusted, the reason he had left the company in his hands when tragedy struck. After their discussion, Sean pulled out some documents for Williams to sign, deals that, according to him, would help the company. He carefully guided Williams' hand, directing him where to place his signature. At that moment, Grace walked in with drinks for both of them. She placed the tray on the table, and as she lowered it, her eyes briefly glanced at the papers. Before she could think, Sean shoved her back sharply. Watch it, lady. Can't you see this is a private matter? Who authorized you to come in here? Sean lashed out angrily. Grace's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to intrude, she whispered. Williams frowned at Sean's tone. Relax, San. She didn't know. She'll be on her way out now. Calm down. Grace quietly left, retreating to her room. Her heart was heavy, shame clouding her mind. But the papers she had glimpsed lingered in her thoughts. Something about them didn't feel right. Could Williams truly know what he was signing? For days, she battled with herself. She wanted to protect him, but at the same time, she felt it wasn't her place to interfere in matters of business. So, she tried to let it slide. But as weeks passed, Sean's visits grew more frequent than usual. His behavior seemed suspicious, and Grace's uneasiness deepened. Every instinct told her something was wrong. Finally, she made up her mind. She had to ask Mr. Williams what was really happening. One quiet evening, Grace sat with Mr. Williams in the living room. They talked for a while, but soon her silence grew heavy. She seemed uneasy, her eyes restless, her words held back. Mr. Williams, sensitive to her change in demeanor, leaned forward. I don't take you for someone who can sit this long without saying much. What's wrong, Grace? He asked gently. Grace hesitated, fighting with her conscience. Please, I want to ask you something. It might sound off, and maybe it's not even my place, but it's been weighing on me for a long time. Mr. Williams gave her the go-ahead with a slight nod. She swallowed hard. How well do you trust your friend, Mr. Sean? You two seem very close. The question caught Williams off guard. Why would Grace, of all people, be curious about Sean? Still, he answered, why the sudden interest in my friend's life? Anyway, Sean has been my best friend since university. I trust him completely. Years ago, when his business crashed, I helped him back on his feet. Now he's proven himself. He runs things for me since I became indisposed. I couldn't ask for anyone better. Grace listened carefully. From his words, she could tell their bond was unshakable, or so he believed. Speaking now felt like walking on thorns, but she had to. Williams raised a brow. Why are you asking me about Sean? I don't even know how to say this, or how you'll take it. Grace began nervously. But Mr. Sean, your friend, he's been ripping you off. Williams froze. His jaw tightened. What do you mean? Grace gathered her courage. Have you ever wondered what's in those documents you sign? The first time I came here, Sean only visited on weekends. But lately, he's here too, sometimes 3 times a week. And each time, he places papers before you. Papers you can't even read, because you're blind. Her words pierced deep. Williams felt something crack inside, disappointment, shame, and anger all colliding. So this is how you repay me, he said, voice cold. After everything I've done for you, you try to turn me against my friend? You think Sean would betray me? I'm not trying to pin you against him. Just what? Williams snapped, cutting her off. You know nothing about business. Nothing. You don't even know what we're signing. So keep your wild suspicions to yourself. And from now on, remember your place. You're just a worker in this house. No more special treatment. His words were like knives. He rose from his seat, leaning on his cane, and left Grace alone in the living room. Her chest tightened. She thought telling him the truth would help, that he'd see her concern for what it was. Instead, everything had exploded in her face. From that day, Williams retreated back into his solitude. It was as though the laughter, the conversations, the fragile bond he had shared with Grace, all of it, had been smoke and mirrors. Gone. And yet, in the quiet of his heart, he still felt the pull to reach out to her. But anger, pride, and the sting of what he thought was betrayal clouded his judgment. Grace, on the other hand, kept trying. She reached out, spoke kindly, and showed concern. But all her efforts were in vain. Williams ignored her, treating her like he treated everyone else before her, with cold arrogance and distance. The next day, Mr. Sean came by the house to see Williams, just as he always did. They sat together like old friends, laughing at memories from their youth, their bond seemingly unshaken. But beneath the surface, something darker lingered. When it came time for business, Sean handed Williams a document. Just sign here, he instructed smoothly. Williams obeyed, tracing his pen across the page as directed. Sean's face, however, carried a look Williams couldn't see, an almost mocking smile hidden beneath a mask of friendship. But in a flickered moment, Williams couldn't resist the words Grace had told him. Afterward, Williams asked casually, "How about the MRC project I signed off 2 weeks ago for the commencement of the new business? What's the update?" Sean leaned back effortlessly. "It's going as planned. In fact, we're already up 2.4% in profit from the shares." "And you said the MRC project was what again? Management something?" Williams pressed, his voice calm but curious. Sean hesitated only briefly before brushing it aside. "Don't worry. I'll handle everything for you. That's why you trusted me and put me in charge." Williams smiled faintly, pretending to be satisfied. He bid his old friend farewell. But as soon as Sean left, unease gnawed at him. Williams wanted to believe, desperately, that Sean, his best friend for years, could never betray him. Yet a quiet voice in his heart said otherwise. To settle his doubts, Williams made a discreet call to Mrs. Elias, the elderly secretary who had been loyal to him for decades. "Mrs. Elias," he asked carefully, "confirm for me, the MRC project, is it running as planned?" There was silence on the line before her steady voice replied, "Mr. Williams, such a project doesn't exist in the company. If it did, it would have been officially recorded." The phone slipped slightly from his grip. His chest tightened. Betrayal cut deep. He leaned back in his chair, heartbroken, remembering Grace's words. She had warned him, but he dismissed her, made her feel like a villain trying to come between him and his closest friend. And now the truth was clear. Sean had been siphoning huge sums of money for months, using William's blindness and trust to his advantage. The next morning at breakfast, Williams could hardly meet Grace's silence. Shame pressed heavy on his shoulders, but he spoke anyway. "Grace, I owe you an apology. I'm so sorry for not trusting you from the beginning. Sean has been my friend for as long as I can remember. I was blinded, not just in sight but in judgment. You tried to save me again, but I pushed you away. Please forgive me." Grace looked at him gently. There was no anger in her eyes, only compassion. "I understand, Mr. Williams. I never wanted to hurt you. I only said what I saw." "No," Williams said firmly, shaking his head. "You didn't make me feel less. You made me see reality, that I am not above being hurt or betrayed." His voice carried the weight of his grief, but also a quiet resolve. That day, Williams made a vow. He would take his life back. With Grace's help, he dedicated himself to vision therapy, determined to regain his sight. Outwardly, he continued to play along, signing every document Sean brought to him, but this time, the company's loyal staff and Grace herself were secretly keeping watch. 5 months passed. After relentless therapy, William's sight began to return. Blurry at first, but with the aid of new eyeglasses, the world sharpened into focus again. And with clear vision, both in sight and in spirit, Williams was finally ready to face Sean, not as the blind man who was deceived, but as a man who had risen from betrayal, stronger than ever. The next day, Williams walked into the office with Grace by his side, her hand gently guiding him. As soon as the workers saw him, the building erupted with applause. Smiles lit up the faces of his staff, relief and joy flooding the room. The board members, seated in the conference hall, turned in disbelief when Williams stepped in, his sight restored, his presence commanding as ever. But no one was more shocked than Sean. His heart nearly stopped when Williams' eyes locked onto his. For weeks, Sean had believed his deceit was secure, convinced that Williams was still blind and helpless. But what he never realized was that the very documents he had been bringing to Williams' mansion were being read, line by line, by the man he thought he had fooled. Williams' voice broke the silence. It was firm, but heavy with grief. "Sean, how could you do this to me?" His eyes burned with betrayal, not from the company's losses, but from the man he once called brother. Sean's face fell. For the first time, his confident mask crumbled. He stuttered, searching for words, but none could erase the truth. Within minutes, the police stormed into the boardroom. The officers walked straight to Sean, placing him in handcuffs. Alongside him, several employees who had aided in the embezzlement were taken away. The boardroom that once held power and wealth now echoed with the downfall of betrayal. Williams stood tall. The applause returned, louder this time, as he was officially reinstated as CEO of his empire. The company was his again, but more importantly, his dignity was restored. Weeks later, after rebuilding the company's trust and ensuring its stability, Williams decided to take a rare day off. He surprised Grace with new clothes, elegant, yet simple, just like her spirit. Together, they stepped out of the rigid world of business into something softer, freer. They laughed over dinner at a fine restaurant, their conversation flowing easily. Later, he drove her to the beach, where the waves crashed gently against the shore under the evening sky. The breeze carried a sense of freedom, and for the first time in a long while, Williams felt peace. Looking at Grace, he realized something profound. The first face he had seen when his sight returned was hers. The woman who had stood by him in his darkest days, who saw the man behind the blindness, was now the light he never knew he needed. As they walked barefoot along the shoreline, William stopped. He turned to her, his eyes glistening, and without hesitation, he kissed her. Grace's heart raced, but she kissed him back, her soul finally at rest in the arms of the man she had unknowingly saved. Holding her close, Williams whispered, "I promise. I will never again take the most important things in my life for granted." And there, under the fading glow of the sunset, the story of the once blind billionaire and the homeless girl from the street was rewritten, not just as one of survival, but of redemption, love, and the miracle of finding light in the most unexpected place. This story teaches us that life is unpredictable, and no amount of wealth or power can shield us from hardship. True strength is not about pride or independence, but about humility, compassion, and the willingness to accept help from others. Mr. Williams learned that even the poor and forgotten can carry wisdom, courage, and loyalty greater than riches. Grace's presence reminds us never to judge people by their status, because kindness and strength often come from unexpected places. In the end, real wealth lies in human connection, trust, and the love we share, not in possessions or success. Dear viewers, what do you think about this story? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and share it with friends. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks, and see you in the next video.
Bye.